Okay, hello everyone. All right, so let's talk about multiple conditionally executed statements. All right, basically the statements that go in the curly braces of your if statement, your if statement block, the code or the lines of code, one line or multiple lines of code that go in the curly braces of your if statement, or that go in the body of your if statement. So let's create a simple if statement structure. Right, we have our if clause, we have our two parentheses, and we have our block, our curly braces for basically our block of code that should execute based on the Boolean expression or based on a condition here, whether it's true or false. Okay, so let's kind of create a simple Boolean expression and say, for example, if 1 is equivalent to 1, right? If 1 is equal to 1, if what's on the left is equal to what's on the right, then if this whole Boolean expression results true, then do what's inside the curly braces. All right, so I'm going to kind of create or print something, system.out.print. I'm going to use the print instead of the println like we've been using for a while. And print, I want to print the word great, right? But I'm going to split them up multiple lines. So first of all, I want to display the two letters G and R, right? And then I'll make a copy of this line, and then I'll repeat it, but I'll change this to EA. And then I'll print it out one last time and then change this to T. So we know how the print function works. When the print function prints out something, for example, if it prints out GR, because it's print and not println, print will print out GR, all right, but then it will keep the position where it's at. So anything that comes after system.out.println gr, anything which is the next thing, which is EA, is going to be printed from the current position here. So it's going to be GREA, and then it's going to stay there. The position is going to be right here. Anything that is printed after EA will be printed, will basically continue from A. Okay, it wouldn't jump to the next line because we are not using println. So let's see first of all how this is going to work, or how this is going to be displayed. We know that this Boolean expression is going to result to true because 1 is equal to 1, right? We are using the comparison operator, right? Two equal signs and not one equal sign, right? We know one equal sign is the assignment operator, and then two equal sign is the comparison or equality operator. So we know this is going to result to true, which means all these lines of code are going to execute. So with multiple conditionally executed statements, first of all, in your curly braces, you can have more than one line of code. Right? If your Boolean expression is true, you can have one line of code, or you can have more than that. Okay? So compile this. Let's see how it displays. We can see that it's printing out great because of the print function, because of the way the print function works. It's not moving after printing out GR. It's not moving the position to the next line and then printing out EA and then moving the positions to the next line and printing out T. It's just printing them all in the same line because the print function doesn't move the position to the next line once it's done printing out whatever you told it to print. All right, so if you remember, I talked about the fact that you can ignore the curly braces only if you have one line of code in your curly braces, right? Or in the body of your if statement, in your if statement block. You can ignore them only if you have one line of code here. In this case, we have 3 lines of code. I just made a copy of this. I just want to show another example. We'll come back to this. In this example, we have 3 lines of code in our body. So if you have more than one line of code in your body, you have to include your curly braces. You have to. Otherwise, it's a problem that can, occur, and then I'll show that in a second. All right, so if you have only one line of code like this, you can go ahead and use the curly braces. That's fine. But you can also ignore it, and this will work fine. This statement will work just fine, right? But if you have more than one line of code like this, then you have to include your curly braces. The reason being that, now let's go back to the top. The reason being, if you have multiple lines of code and you ignore the curly braces, right, only the first line is going to be considered part of the if statement. In other words, the if statement is going to evaluate the Boolean expression over here. If it's true, only the first line of code is going to execute. These two statements, or any statement apart from the first one, are going to execute no matter what. They are not going to be part of the if statement anymore, meaning they're not going to be executed based on whether the Boolean expression over here is true, okay, or false. So really, it looks like this. If you don't include curly braces, you may think all three are together, right? You may think all three are together this way, but then in actual fact, they are like this. If 1 is equal to 1, if this is true, only this line of code is going to execute. Then these two will execute no matter what. Even if this is false, these two are going to execute. Even if this is true, these two are going to execute because they are no longer dependent on this. They are on their own. So the if statement does its stuff, and then these two will be printed, right? Okay. So if you're using more than one line of code in your curly braces or in your if statement block, you have to surround them with curly braces to show, that all these statements are together, and then they should all execute together based on whether the Boolean expression, okay, is true or false, right? So let's try it. I'm going to put them back, right? If I don't have my curly braces, only the first line is going to execute based on whether this is true or false, right? So first of all, we know that 1 is equivalent to 1. We know this Boolean expression is going to result to true. And so that means we know this is going to execute, right? But we also said that these two are no longer part of the if statement. So that means they will also execute, right? So you may think, well, everything is working fine. Let's compile this and then run. So you may think everything is working fine because first of all, 1 is equal to 1. This results to true. So that means that only the first line is executed, which is GR. And then the if statement is done. Now it moves to the next line, which is EA, it printed out, and then T, it prints out. But let's change the Boolean expression to, let's say, 2 is equal to 1. So if 2 is equal to 1, we know this statement is going to evaluate to false. And since only the first line of code is part of the if statement, that is not going to execute because 2 is equal to 1 is false, right? We know this is equal to false. So, this is going to evaluate to false, which means this line of code, which is part of the if statement, will not execute. But these two lines of code are no longer, they are not part of the if statement. They will execute no matter what, whether or not this is true or false. So 2 is equal to 1 is false. So this first line of code, which is part of the if statement, won't execute. These two, which are not part of the if statement or are not dependent on the if statement, are going to run regardless. So compile this, run, and we can see that only EA and T are executed, right? This line wasn't executed. This first line wasn't executed because, first of all, it's part of the if statement. This was false, and so this wasn't executed. But these two are no longer executed, right? These two are no longer part of the if statement because when you have multiple lines of code and you don't surround it with curly braces, then only the first line is part of the if statement, and these two are no longer. So really, they look something like this, like I did before, right? So if it does, it's finished. It's done with the if statement, and then it comes to do anything or execute anything after the if statement. So you have to make sure that anytime you have more than one line of code, you are surrounding them with curly braces, and then in that case, all of them are going to execute. So 2 is equal to 1, we know is false, right? So that means that all of these are not going to execute because now you surrounded them with curly braces, and you kind of told your program that, okay, you should do all three of them. You've grouped them and say, okay, all three of them are together. You should do all of them based on whether this is true or false. So let's compile this. We know 2 is equal to 1 is false. So that means none of these, lines of code, okay, are going to execute. So compile, run, and we see none of them execute. But as soon as we change it to, let's say, 1 is equal to 1, which you know is going to evaluate to true, then all three of them are going to execute. So compile, run, we see great. Right, so if you have one line of code in your curly braces, you can ignore it. You can ignore your curly braces and just display it that way. If you also surround that one line of code with curly braces, that's also fine. It will work. If you have multiple lines of code in your if statement block, or basically if you have multiple conditionally executed statements, then you have to surround all of them with curly braces to show that they are together, right? And this is why I don't advise that you even exclude or leave out your curly braces, because then you don't have to worry about, oh, when should I put my curly braces, when should I not put my curly braces, right? Putting the curly braces also kind of organizes your code. It kind of encloses things together. So I'll say if you have one line of code, don't leave the curly braces out, although you can, but don't. Always surround them with curly braces, and this will work just fine. If you have multiple lines of code, still, use curly braces. I mean, you have to, right? Use curly braces so that anytime you have your use statements, just have your curly braces there, and you don't have to worry about, okay, when should I put them there, or when should I not put them there? It's best practice. You're not going to face any issues with curly braces, right? If you always have them there. But if you don't have them there, right, you can face problems when you have multiple lines of code. Okay. So I hope this is clear, right? If you have any questions or if it's not too clear, please let me know in the comment section, and I'll do everything to respond to them. Thank you very much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time with the next video. All right then. Bye-bye.